It seems the latest hot topic in the manifestation community, at least from my perspective, I think particularly the last year seems to be this concept of I am, which I can understand why. And I mean, I get it, right? It's it kind of throws everything else out of the door and you're just left with the simple concept of I am. And whatever you attach to that is essentially what you experience, right? Simple enough, you would think, except not really, because I've heard people say your I amness, your I amness knows everything and you don't need to be specific and you're all that is and you're all knowing and you're all being and blah 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 blah. And okay, so we know what I am means. It means I am everything, right? I am everything, everything is me. But then you'll have people sit here and tell you they'll start giving you a whole rule book as to how to speak to your I am. Make sure you speak in the present tense. Make sure you're, visualizing from first person. Make sure that when you claim something, you claim it so that you don't harm someone else. Make sure that, like, I've just heard so many things, and then there's a whole self concept. You need self concept. You need to rewire your brain. You need to meditate. You need to hypnotize yourself. There's just so many things attached to said I am. And while I can understand why, to each their own, that's their individual experiences. What I don't understand is if you are saying that you are all knowing, you are all being, and if you know everything, then what is left to know? What is left to do? What I mean by that is, how can you say, I am all knowing, I am the beginning, I'm the end, you know, I'm everything all at once, but then tell yourself you need to have self-concept to feel deserving of your desire or worthy? Because if you're all knowing, wouldn't you know that you deserve that? Wouldn't you know that you're the person who has, I guess, a decent self-concept? Like, why are you re retraining yourself to have a self that I don't understand that. Um, or if you're all knowing, right, and you're someone who you're, I don't know, a kind person and you want your desires fairly, I suppose, and you don't want to hurt someone, because I've heard it where people say, make sure that when you ask for something, you include the caveat that it's without harm being done unto others. Well, what are you, if you're all that is and all knowing, wouldn't that kind of be like a no-brainer? Unless you think you're not all that is and your human brain and your mind and your consciousness, whatever you want to call it, are two separate things, and one has to catch up to the other. And then if you say that, then I can accept that. That makes sense. But I don't understand people who say I'm all knowing and then they add like the caveats that you have to. It's like playing catch up with your human self. Well, and again, I acknowledge the human self. I can understand, that I have a human vessel that's interacting with this external world, and it's the one that's having these experiences physically. But the people that say these things, they almost say it in a way to, I suppose, empower themselves. I'm all that is, I'm all knowing, but in that same breath, they strip their powers away. Well, I have to make sure that my self-concept is great. Well, self-concept of what? Of who? Of your all-knowing self or your self-concept for the human? And if it's self-concept for the human, then again, that seems to me that you're implying or you're acknowledging that you're separate from the human and your human has, I don't know, more powers than you for you to try and convince it. Like, why, what are we, who are we convincing? Why are we convincing? That's what I don't understand. If I sit here and say that I am all knowing and I am all that is. I don't need to write my desire 1,001 times to know what I want. I don't need to be super specific. When I say be specific with your desires, I mean don't settle for anything less because you think that's what you deserve. If you want a very specific kind of experience, have that experience. What I mean is you don't need to get specific as to, well, I want $1 million, but I want to make sure that no one gets hurt, and I want to make sure the money is legal, and I want to make sure that the money comes in 100s and not tens, and you know what I mean, like that. Like you don't need to do that. I'm sure your I am understands what you mean when it says you want $1 million. You want $1 million to be obviously yours, and what you're welcome to whatever form, and like, is that making sense? Because I feel like all that does is just it's more policing, it's more efforting on your end when you have to sit here and specify to yourself. No one knows you better than you. I've said this before. You can lie to people around you, you can lie to everything outside of you, but you can't lie to yourself. When you're having those inner conversations, when you're talking to yourself within, it knows what you want. The example I always give is when back in the day, before I knew much about this, when I would want to do something and I knew I wanted to, but I would pretend to ask around, like my friends, for advice, right? Like, hey guys, do you think I should, get this? For example, like let's say I wanted to buy a new purse and it's, expensive, and I just bought another one not too long ago, and I feel a little like I've splurged a bit much. And people are telling me I need to be careful with my money. So I'm like, okay, well, let me debate this. Should I get this purse or not? So deep down, I know I want this purse. I know I do, right? What happens is I'll ask around like 4 or 5 friends. The first one will probably be like, no, don't get it. You just bought a purse, enjoy that one first, right? Then I'm like, okay, well, no, she didn't give me the answer that I want. So then I kind of go around asking until I get that one yes, that the person that says, hell yeah, buy that purse, you enjoy that purse, YOLO, it's your life, treat yourself, blah, blah, blah. The minute I hear that yes, check out, done, order complete. And that's kind of how it is with anything. You already know what you want. You already know who you are and what you want to experience. You don't need to sit here and play tag with your human self and try and convince yourself of your desires and whatever. Like you know what you want. If you know you want a specific person, you know you want a specific person. And you know how you ideally want it. And again, I'm not talking about the specifics of the unraveling or materializing, if you will, but I mean just that you want a person who is, I don't know, tall, short, thin, large, rich, poor, like the stuff that you want, right? I've always wanted a man that's like Christian Grey with Michael Scofield features. I don't have to specify every single time when I'm thinking about like my future with a man that it has to have Christian Grey and Michael Scofield. It knows that because that's what I want. That is my innate desire. It knows, I know, my higher self, my consciousness, my God, whatever you want to call it. It knows what you want. You don't need to convince anyone at all, especially people outside of you, especially everyone outside of you. Your desire is your desire. You don't need to convince anyone to get on board. You don't need to convince anyone to accept or deny it or approve it, it's your desire. Hell, go enjoy it, But I don't understand why how can you say you're all that is and then you have to abide by the rules of the external world. Like I said, I can understand if someone was saying it's to interact with your external world because you're human, you're having a human experience, and so you kind of navigate it through that human lens. But people don't say that. People say I am, and I'm all knowing to kind of override the human experience and make it seem like the human doesn't matter, but then every single thing they do thereafter is directly for the human. So either you acknowledge the human or you don't. But I don't know. I don't I think it's very counterproductive or counterintuitive when people say, I'm all knowing, I'm all being, but then oh, I have to make sure I get my self concept right. I have to make sure I I meditate 15 times a day. I have to make sure that I'm listening to my affirmations. Affirmations for what? Your higher self, what I again, your God, whatever you want to call it, that all-knowing thing knows what it knows who you need to be or want to be to get when you have that like people say make sure you're in the right state. What state are you being? Who are you being when you're doing something? That is so exhausting. If I'm all knowing, then I don't care what I do or what state I do it from. It's right. It's the right state because I said so. Like, isn't it that? Wouldn't you think it's that simple? Because I said so. It is because I know. Like again, why why the convincing? Who are we trying to convince? Um, that's my two bit on that. I don't like I said, I can understand and I appreciate the concept of I am, and I understand it differently than how it's being portrayed. It seems these days, but I think when you hear that, and then you hear someone say, "Oh, but make sure your self concept is 100. Make sure you're out, you're doing your affirmations all day long." Then that person, in my eyes, doesn't. They don't understand what it means to be or to have or to know I am. Right? Um, I don't. What is? There's a quote in the Bible. How does it go? That even my friend has said this before. I don't read the Bible, but like your grunts and sighs are even enough to know, right? Like you could roll your eyes and still know what you want. You can, I don't know, grunt, be upset, I don't know, be happy and still know exactly what you want without having to get your self concepts back up, without trying to convince yourself externally like, oh, I'm all that is, I'm all that is, I'm all that is. If you're all that is, why do you need to repeat to yourself you're all that is? If you're all knowing, why do you need affirmations to remind you that you're all knowing? I thought you knew. I don't know. That's just my little 2 cents on that. I think it feels I don't know. I don't agree with it, I suppose. I like I said, I understand the concept of I am and the way I understand it is differently. I don't affirm all day long anymore. Back then I was a different person because back then I didn't understand it as well as I do now. But I don't sit here and affirm all day long and write journals and do visualizations and make sure I'm in the present tense and not the past tense and make sure I'm in the correct state. What the hell are even states? That's a whole other conversation that I'll probably discuss on, but that was a setback for humanity. I remember when I first heard states, I thought, what in the hell is this? And then everyone started talking about states. And then I was like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. And that just gave me more reason to police myself and to question myself. Am I doing this right? Am I in the right state when I'm saying these things or doing these things? But anyway, that'll be a conversation for another day. Thank you for listening, as always.